And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on our podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. My guest today is Anthony Davenport. Anthony is an author, Anthony is a speaker, and Anthony is the CEO and founder of Regal Credit Management. So, Anthony I'd sort of put Anthony in the category of author, thought leader, speaker that's really business guy first, where he's got his business, which is Regal Credit Management, and has written a book and does some speaking and a lot of other things using content to elevate the brand and find clients and all the things that we all like to do. So welcome aboard today, Anthony. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Peter. Great to be here.
So first, so you have an interesting niche. So why don't you give us a little overview of what Regal Credit Management does, because then it'll make more sense when we talk about the content.
Yeah, and it's kind of a funky industry. It's one that I kind of made up, but essentially we call it credit management, which entails building credit for people. And most often those are people that are like professional athletes. They just got drafted. People don't think of the issues that they face, but just because you're 7 feet tall and you have a big contract on the way, you have any credit whatsoever, and that causes problems.
Well, and you're probably 19 years old. So 19 years old with access to lots of zeros, odd things can happen.
That's one way of putting it. Their business managers will put it another, but so I help them build credit. If you think about the TV and film world, there's a huge invasion from the Brits. They're invading again, and we help a lot of them build their credit as they get cast in shows here, and they don't have any, the credit doesn't translate over. We also repair credit. So we remove late payments, collections, tax liens, judgments, that sort of stuff from a credit report using the laws. And then the final bit, which is really has been exploding for us, is we protect the identities of high profile, high net worth individuals, lock down their credit, prevent anything from happening. And Peter, we can't be friends anymore if you say it's like LifeLock, because that's a question I often get.
Well, okay, I want to be friends, so I won't say that. So you've got a very specific niche, a very specific target market, specific content, etc. So tell me about how you started to experiment with content and thought leadership as a way to grow and drive your business.
It's something that I approach completely the wrong way, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs do.
Awesome.
You have to try something and then say, well, that failed miserably. Let me try something else. So I initially started doing like marketing and content stuff because I thought everyone else was, and that's what you had to do. And I would
So it was peer pressure.
kind of was. It was just like, well, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do email blast. And I was like, okay, let me put together an email blast. And it looked terrible and it looked awful. Uh, let me send blast emails out to people I don't know. And that obviously didn't work. So I went through an evolution of processes essentially, so that eventually I figured out what really resonated with people is when I told stories that either related to them, or the ones that really registered were the ones that I talked about my own experience and how I came to learn about the world of credit. And it's one I didn't tell people for years, but I found that's the one that inspired a lot of people to want to do their own thing. And I've been approached by other people that have said, I was inspired to create my own business and get going after I listened to your story.
Great. You start doing it, you do it the wrong way, right? You copy what everybody else is doing, and just because the crowd is doing it doesn't mean it's the smart thing to do. And then you learn that doesn't work, and then you got a little more transparent, a little bit more authentic. And what were the indications that you knew, hey, this is sort of kind of starting to work? I got a thing here. Like that's working. How did you measure that?
It's when the press started calling me, honestly.
Okay. So tell me about that. So all of a sudden you're doing your thing, Regal Credit, and what was the genesis of that?
So I remember one of the early articles that found success is I put a blog post up. I didn't know if anyone read my blog. I didn't look at the analytics or whatnot, but I kept hearing about how athletes and entertainers were going broke. And I know from firsthand experience just why they go broke. So I wrote an article, or a blog post, sorry, that was, why Kanye isn't broke and why he's $53 million in debt and what that means and why that's not a big deal.
Okay.
And a writer from CBS Market Watch read it and said, "You know what you're talking about. I want to have you as a resource. And would you help me write an article that related to how Louis C.K. at the time, before he was known for what he's known for, he took a big gamble on himself. And he put a lot of money on his own sort of production. And they were like, is he broke? Has he bet the farm and he's lost? And it's like, no, you have to really think about entertainers and athletes as a brand. They're a corporation, and big corporations like at Kanye, they're going to accumulate some debt. They're going to take some big risk. They're going to make some acquisitions. They're not going to stick in one lane. They're going to diversify their revenue flow. So 53 million in debt is a big number, but it's really not when you consider how much all of these different aspects of his business are worth.
Got it. So you start to get some feedback from the press, you start to get some responses, and how do you then continue to develop content? And I want to sort of get up to the book as well, to, I would imagine, get the name out there, build your brand, because ultimately, if you look at it as a business development or brand building activity, you've got to put your pencil to it and say, this is the amount of time, energy, resources I'm spending, and this is sort of the return on that. So talk about that for a moment, if you could.
So one of the things that I did is I started picking up more speaking engagements after doing more of these articles, and I'd reference our articles.
Okay.
And those were good opportunities to get real-time feedback in terms of what was resonating with people.
So it's a laboratory for you. So speaking was partly a laboratory. You can try something out if people space out. Not so good if people lean in like, I got something
Yeah,
here.
it's just, I imagine it's like, what stand-up comedians do. They try material out and they
Right.
see what makes people say, ah. So, I would speak in front of people and see what they really went, ah, to. And that was a way beyond articles to see what people were really gravitating towards and what were the real hits and what were the misses.
I mean, how many of those ahs, given that you're an expert in this space, were actually quite surprising to you? Like, I didn't think it would be that thing that would make people's eyes go
Almost all
big.
of them, really. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to write a book, was because I had a full hour long talk set, and every couple minutes I would expect one of those ahs. And I realized people really don't know this stuff, and they really should, because it's impacting so many different aspects of their life. I realized that's my unique value proposition, is that I know something that impacts a large swath of people, call it everyone over the age of 18. Yet very few people know the mechanisms behind it, and I do. And I can collect all of those ah moments and put it into a book and educate the masses.
So I know your book came out, I guess, a year ago, a little less than a year ago,
Yeah,
somewhere
it
in
came
that time
out
frame.
about 10 months ago.
So there's lots of folks listening that are contemplating a book, in the process of, maybe in the midst of launching it. Could you give us the sort of Anthony's book journey? So from when you made the commitment to do it, and then sort of everything post that, writing it, getting it out there, where you struggled, where you were surprised. Just give us sort of the narrative on that, if you could.
Yeah, so I had, after doing a lot of these.
And by the way, plug the book. What's the name of the book? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
right. It's called Your Score: An Insider's Secrets to Understanding, Controlling, and Protecting Your Credit Score.
Got it. Thank you.
So, it occurred to me that I have an idea, and it's worthy of putting into a book. I met with a friend that's a New York Times bestselling author over dinner and said, I'm thinking about, self-publishing my own book and getting it out there, just so I can have something that'll be good marketing and it'll put a lot of knowledge in the hands of people who want it. And he said, don't be a fool. Get an agent. Someone will pay you a good amount of money to talk about this sort of subject. So I did. I'd already written a lot of a book already, which is, again, another way I did it wrong. My agent was like, that's totally not how we do this. What we do is we first figure out what is the concept, what is it we are uniquely positioned to say, put together a sample chapter and a proposal. I put together both of those, and then he came back and said, I love what you have to say, just not how you're saying it. Like, we need to make this more of entertaining storytelling. So he then told me to partner up with a writer who, he had one in mind. We hit it off great. We started working on the proposal and the sample chapter from scratch, and it honestly took us a year of on and off again, putting it together, saying to the agent, okay, what do you think of this? And he'd come back and say, nope, that's not what I need. I need something more along these lines.
Okay.
And then we eventually had a proposal and sample chapter ready. The agent shopped it around to publishers finally, sent it to a whole bunch of them. And then it was like all of a whirlwind. So, within a week, a couple publishers said that they wanted to sit down, which he said was a good sign. He prepared me for a meeting with all of the different execs from these firms, and they were going to, beat me up and tell me every reason why they shouldn't buy the book, which was the exact opposite. I mean, they were all like, we've never heard this information. How have we not heard this? If we don't win the rights to your book, we're going to read it. And then, we had, multiple bids to take a look at and decide. And then we picked one.
Great. And then, so actually, one thing I want to drill down on for a moment is you mentioned your writing partner. So a lot of people sort of don't understand the continuum or the spectrum that folks refer to when they talk about a ghostwriter or a writing partner, right? So one end of the spectrum is actually somebody that writes the book that you put your name on. The other end is, sort of minor league editing, and then there's everything in between in terms of an intellectual sparring partner, an accountability buddy. Describe that relationship, because it's an interesting professional relationship, the author and the writer and the ghostwriter.
Yeah, I found it to be critical because I know this knowledge. I'm a subject matter expert. I can get in front of a crowd of people and tell it in an interesting, exciting way, but I've practiced that throughout the years. What I haven't done is taken that information and put it in written form and make it exciting and informative and all that. So that was really where I worked with a writer to help hone that message. How do you make this exciting and entertaining? We would meet every week for an hour and a half, and we did that for I think about 15 or 16 weeks. Discuss different subjects. I would say, all right, we're going to talk about collections and how they don't work the way you think they do, or how to get things removed from a credit report and those sorts of issues. And then he would put it in written form, and then I would correct him and say, nope, it's more like this. And the end product is that, I'm biased here, but if you read the reviews, you'll find many people agree. It really flows well. It's very exciting and entertaining and eye-opening, and it should make you come away mad that the system is this way and that you weren't educated on it.
And it sounds like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you obviously have the technical knowledge, the subject matter expertise. You could have potentially written the book, but it doesn't sound like it would have been as readable, or I don't know if enjoyable is the right word, but it wouldn't have been brought to life to the level that it has been because of the expertise of a professional writer.
Oh, 100%. And you have to think about what your end aim is. If you're looking to self-publish, fine, just find an accountability partner and you may be okay. But if you want to work with a real publisher, you have to think about, do I have the time to do this, and do I have the skill set to do that?
Got it. So now the book is done, and we went through sort of the process of the ghostwriter, and it's published, and now we're at rainbows, unicorns, and fairy tales, right? Like, and we lived happily ever after. What does that look like?
So that's the part that, again, I didn't know what to expect on that again either. We went through multiple revisions of the book from the time we finished the book, which we finished it in January 2017. It wasn't published until January 2018. So that's a long time to sit and then have revisions. And by that time, I was sick of hearing about the book. I didn't want anything to do with it. I was so over revisions and thinking about it and reading it. And it was like, oh, guys, let's just get this over with. And then all of a sudden it came out, and it was a huge flurry again. Uh, Speaking to the press.
So I want to pause you there for a quick second, because I don't think most people realize that. So you write a book. So if the book was done in, would you say, January of 17? So that means you actually really wrote it in 16, and then it really doesn't come out until 18. And then so you sort of walked away from it, and then you're sort of, I don't want to say stuck with it isn't the word. Then you got to go back to it. So oftentimes what happens a lot from my vantage point is by the time a book is out and it's gotten success and it's rocking and rolling, whatever, the thought leader, the author, the creator is totally bored out of their mind with it, and they're on mentally, or at least intellectually, to the next three things that they're doing. So does that resonate?
Oh, 1,000%, 1,000%. I had no idea, but it definitely was like, I'm sick of this, and now you guys want to talk about it more.
And it's funny because you can't put that vibe out there because you have to help launch the book and support that process. So anyway, so now the book comes out, and tell us sort of outcomes, expectations, surprises, good, bad, ugly.
So I found it a fun and exciting challenge to balance book promotion along with running my business and also having a family. So, in that first month, for example, we were all about the book. I did probably 30 to 40 radio shows in the first 30 or so days. Did the book was in the press a bunch. People wanted quotes on it. I did 4 different book launch events, which some people do a whole lot more than that. I really wanted to kind of limit it to that and do it in 2 different cities. And then it was just kind of an interesting thing to sit back and see what other people thought of this and how was that going to impact my business.
Yeah, and how has that been impactful to the business?
So, for one thing, it definitely adds legitimacy to who I am and what I do. Uh, when I talk about, building credit, fixing credit, protecting credit, those are concepts that most people don't really have a lot of an idea about, especially repairing credit. They think it's like I sprinkled pixie dust on a report, makes it look better. And people don't believe in it. They think that it's all snake oil. So when I say I'm a published author and it's from a major publisher, now they're like, oh, you must really know what you're doing.
So it's sort of a nice way of saying, "Shut up and listen to me. I know what I'm
Yeah, pretty
talking
much. You
about."
just throw the
Right.
book at them and say, like, and I've definitely pulled that line on people when some, now that my family understands really what I do, noticed many extended family members will reach out and say, I've got a question. And I know they've read the book. And then even one person I had to push back and say, you just asked me what to do. I told you what to do. And now you're telling me someone else is telling you something else. Are you going to believe the guy who wrote the book on this subject or just some random banker?
Right, who doesn't have your interest at heart, whatever. But yeah, no, it's a great way to get the gravitas, right, and the validation, and there is a reason you should listen to me. I spent a year of my life writing this, and this is what I do. So cool. So what would you suggest now? We're running a little bit short on time here. Somebody else is out there today, hopefully listening now, and their subject matter expertise could be something totally different, but they're sort of on the cusp of where you were a couple of years ago, thinking about writing the book, writing it. What would you advise them to do, and maybe to not do?
The one thing that you absolutely have to do, and this is something you and I had a conversation about, you have to really think about what you want the book to do for you. Do you want it to boost your business? Do you want it to add credibility? Do you want to get a big advance from a publisher? Do you want to do speaking engagements? You have to really think about what it is you want the book to do for you and then position everything along those lines. That's something that I would recommend doing. What not to do is just spend money for the sake of spending money on promoting it and whatnot. I I was loath to want to spend a dime on social media, and I found that social media did nothing for me. Uh, it, and yet there were other aspects just because of like who my business is, who my contacts are, and then the fact that many of them are just not going to buy the book. They're not the target for the book. So social media wasn't going to do a lot.
So it's interesting. So what you said there is really, really interesting. Is ultimately it's know your client, right? Because the reader of your book, in your case, which is very different than most, is not necessarily the target client, right? So you know who your client base is, and it sounds like you've done your homework and realized they're probably not reading these types of books. So who is reading these types of books, and how do they influence the folks that you actually want to do business with? Because that's sort of an interesting once removed question.
Right. So the folks that I cater to are high end, high net worth, high profile individuals. And then the folks that buy the book are usually just middle of the road people all over America that are, they're trying to save money for retirement. They're trying to save money college. They're trying to put food on the table, regular sort of folk. And so they're looking for real practical advice, which is what we really aim the book at.
Got it. Got it. Which is not the business that you've got. So potentially there's opportunity to provide some other sort of service to those people. I don't know what that might be at this juncture, but maybe there's some sort of a low touch, highly scalable, tool based something that's a derivative of the IP. Because it seems like you've got demand that you're not supplying other than they bought a book, they're not going to buy another one, right?
Yeah, that's really it. Is I had to think about, I'm producing a product that's for people that aren't my target market, and that's okay. That was beneficial too, because I could put literally everything in the book and say, here's your blueprint on how to do it, and I didn't have to worry about, well, now people are going to spend $13 on Amazon to buy the book and not a few $100s with me to get this done.
Yeah, two totally different markets.
Yeah, I didn't have that conflict. So it's kind of a unique position, but I had to realize going into that, what is this book going to be about? Who is it going to cater to? How is it going to impact my business? Not really much. And that's okay. That's okay.
Right. There's a difference between the business and the brand. So anyway, this has been great, Anthony. I appreciate you sharing the journey because it's an interesting one of not the traditional, academic or business leader or whatever, but it's someone that's got deep expertise in a specific niche and how you've gone down this path and gotten a publishing deal and how it's impacted the business and not impacted the business and all that. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I think there's a lot for lots of people to learn from. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.